Hey everyone, today we are unpacking a really provocative argument about American foreign policy. It's this idea that the US isn't actually charting its own course, but is instead, trapped in the ghost of an empire that's long gone.
So the source material we're digging into today kicks things off with this really blunt question. It's a question that right away makes you rethink how America sees itself on the world stage.
Okay, so here's the central argument, the big idea, that U.S. foreign policy isn't really its own. The claim is that it's basically just a continuation of a failed British imperial project. Yeah, like a historical hand-me-down.
All right, an inherited empire. To really wrap our heads around this, we've got to look at how the source claims America's identity was even formed in the first place. Because the argument here is that if your foreign policy is a hand-me-down, well, maybe your origin story is too.
And that leads us straight into what the source calls the Anglo supremacy myth. The idea is that the history a lot of us grew up with in school, the one focused on people like Columbus and Cabot, who, by the way, were both Italian, was basically designed to sell this story that America was, at its core, a British and Anglo creation.
But according to this argument, the actual reality is way more diverse. I mean, the real work of building America, that was done by so many different groups of people. So to say it was just a British thing, well, that kind of erases everyone else's part in the story, doesn't it?
And to make this point crystal clear, the source uses some really interesting examples from history. Take the telephone, for instance. Most of us were taught Alexander Graham Bell, right? But the source points to Antonio Meucci, an Italian inventor. The argument is that this is just another example of that Anglo story taking all the credit.
Okay, so how does this whole Anglo mindset thing actually connect to foreign policy? Well, the argument really zeroes in on one specific crucial moment, a handoff that supposedly happened in the Middle East right after World War II.
Now, to describe what happened when the British pulled out of Palestine back in 1947, our source uses, well, some pretty informal language. It says the British just noped out of the whole mess, basically walking away from their role there after coming under attack.
And this timeline really shows you just how fast this all went down. So, 1947, the British are out. The very next year, 1948, boom, the United States recognizes Israel. Then, through the 60s, the involvement just gets deeper with advanced weapons. And that leads to this really tense standoff with JFK over Israel's nuclear program. A standoff that, and the source makes a big point of this, ended right after he was assassinated.
So this inherited policy, it wasn't just about changing alliances on a map. The argument is that it came with a really heavy price. And this gets us to what the source calls a legacy of conflict. Basically, a whole string of direct and sometimes violent consequences for the U.S.
One of the most striking examples the source gives of this is the attack on the USS Liberty in 1967. This was an American intelligence ship, just doing its job in the area, and it was attacked.
And the source really wants to drive home the human cost of this. In that one incident, 34 Americans were killed.
And on top of that, 171 were injured. These aren't just numbers on a page. The whole point being made here is that these are the real tragic results of getting involved in a conflict that, according to this view, was never America's to begin with.
So, when you look at events like this, it all boils down to one huge question, right? It's the real question at the heart of this whole thing. Why are we even involved? What is the real reason for all of this?
Well, the source doesn't really give you one simple, neat answer. Instead, it lays out this kind of complex web of possible reasons that might all be connected. You've got everything from the power of political lobbies like AIPAC to much darker theories about blackmail programs. And then it all circles back to that core idea that maybe this is just the U.S. continuing old British Empire policies, driven by historical trauma.
Okay, so after laying all this out, what's the solution? Where do we go from here? Well, the argument isn't just about criticizing the past. It actually suggests a way forward, a path of letting go of history. And the way to do that, it says, is by looking at how other former empires have managed to move on. And this comparison is absolutely central to the whole argument. On one side, you've got what the source calls the Anglo way, still obsessed with old conflicts, still trying to control the geopolitical chessboard. But then, on the other side, you have these other former empires that chose a totally different path. They started focusing on their own culture, their own people.
Think about it. Places like Italy, with its Roman history, or Turkey, or France, Spain, Japan, even Mexico. These were all centers of massive empires at one point. But today, the argument is that we know them for their amazing food, their culture, their art, their innovations, not for trying to run the world.
And that's really the final conclusion here.
It's a call to action for America to, finally build its own culture, to let go of all that old world trauma and the baggage that comes from an empire it only inherited.
And so that leaves us with this final thought, a really provocative question to think about. Should a nation's future be defined by another country's past? I mean, is it really possible to let go of that kind of history?